Welcome, traveler. You found your way to Bearbo Reads the Realms, a cozy corner of the world where stories come to life. I'm Bearbo, your storyteller and guide through the realms. Now please, settle in, rest your weary heart, and leave the world behind for a little while. The fire's warm, the tea's steeping, and a fine tale awaits us. In Chapter 2 of Dragonflight, we shift our gaze to Benden Weyr's bronze rider, Flor. As rumors of Thread's return grow harder to ignore, Flor arrives at Ruatha Hold under the guise of the Search, seeking the one destined to bond with a queen dragon. So, stoke the fire, sip your tea, and join me as we uncover secrets in stone walls and who may change the world. Thank you for resting here with me. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more tales from the realms. Chapter 2. From the weir and from the bowl, bronze and brown and blue and green, rise the dragonmen of Pern, aloft, on wing, seen, then unseen. Flor, on bronze Nemeth's great neck, appeared first in the skies above the chief hold of facts, so-called Lord of the High Reaches. Behind him, in proper wedge formation, the wingmen came into sight. Flor checked the formation automatically. It was as precise as on the moment of their entry to between. As Nemeth curved in an arc that would bring them to the perimeter of the hold, consonant with the friendly nature of this visitation, Flor surveyed with mounting aversion the disrepair of the ridge defenses. The firestone pits were empty, and the rock-cut gutters radiating from the pits were green-tinged with a mossy growth. Was there even one lord in Pern who maintained his hold rocky in the observance of the ancient laws? Flor's lips tightened to a thinner line. When this search was over and the impression made, there would have to be a solemn, punitive council held at the weir. And by the golden shell of the queen, he, Flor, meant to be its moderator. He would replace lethargy with industry. He would scour the green and dangerous scum from the heights of Pern, the grass blades from its stoneworks. No verdant skirt would be condoned in any farmhold, and the tithings that had been so miserly, so grudgingly presented, would, under pain of firestoning, flow with decent generosity into the Dragonware. Nemeth rumbled approvingly as he veined his pinions to land lightly on the grass-edged flagstones of Fax's hold. The bronze dragon furled his great wings, and Flor heard the warning klaxon of the hold's great tower. Nemeth dropped to his knees as Flor indicated he wished to dismount. The bronze rider stood by Nemeth's huge wedge-shaped head, politely awaiting the arrival of the hold lord. Flor idly gazed down the valley, hazy with warm spring sunlight. He ignored the furtive heads that peered at the dragonman from the parapet slits in the cliff windows. Flor did not turn as the rush of air past him announced the arrival of the rest of the wing. He knew, however, when Fnor, the brown rider, who was coincidentally his half-brother, took the customary position on his left, a dragon length to the rear. From the corner of his eye, Flor glimpsed Fnor twisting to death with his boot heel the grass that crowded up between the stones. An order, muffled to an intense whisper, issued from within the great court beyond the open gates. Almost immediately, a group of men marched into sight, led by a heavy-set man of medium height. Nemeth arched his neck, angling his head so that his chin rested on the ground. Nemeth's many-faceted eyes, on a level with Flor's head, fastened with disconcerting interest on the approaching party. The dragons could never understand why they generated such an abject fear in common folk. At only one point in his lifespan would a dragon attack a human, and that could be excused on the grounds of simple ignorance. Flor cannot explain to the dragon the politics behind the necessity of inspiring awe in the holders, lord and craftsman alike. He could only observe that the fear and apprehension showing in the faces of the advancing squad, which troubled Nemeth, was oddly pleasing to him, Flor. Welcome, Bronze Rider, to the Hold of Facts, Lord of the High Reaches. He is at your service. And the man made an adequately respectful salute. The use of the third-person pronoun could be construed by the meticulous to be a veiled insult. This fit in with the information Flor had on Facts, so he ignored it. His information was also correct in describing Facts as a greedy man. It showed in the restless eyes that flicked at every detail of Flor's clothing, at the slight frown when the intricately etched sword hilt was noticed. Flor noticed, in his own turn, the several rich rings that flashed on Fax's left hand. The overlord's right hand remained slightly cocked after the habit of the professional swordsman. His tunic, of rich fabric, was stained and none too fresh. The man's feet, in heavy weirhide boots, were solidly planted, weight balanced forward on his toes. A man to be treated cautiously, Flor decided, as one should the conqueror of 5 neighboring holds. Such greedy audacity was in itself a revelation. Fax had married into a 6th, and had legally inherited, however unusual the circumstances, 7th. He was a lecherous man by reputation. Within these 7 holds, Flor anticipated a profitable search. Let Regal go southerly to pursue search among the indolent, if lovely women there. The Weyr needed a strong woman this time. Jorah had been worse than useless with Nemorth. Adversity, uncertainty, those were the conditions that bred the qualities Flor wanted in a werewoman. We ride in search, Flor drawled softly, and request the hospitality of your hold, Lord Fax. Fax's eyes widened imperceptibly at mention of a search. I had heard Jorah was dead, Fax replied, dropping the third person abruptly as if Flor had passed some sort of test by ignoring it. So Nemorth has laid a queen, He continued, his eyes darting across the rank of the wing, noting the disciplined stance of the riders, the healthy color of the dragons. Flor did not dignify the obvious with an answer. And my lord, Fax hesitated, expectantly inclining his head slightly towards the dragonman. For a pulse beat, Flor wondered if the man was deliberately provoking him with such subtle insults. The name of the Bronze Rider should be as well known throughout Pern as the name of the Dragon Queen and her werewoman. Flor kept his face composed, his eyes on Fax's. Leisurely, with the proper touch of arrogance, Fëanor stepped forward, stopping slightly behind Nemeth's head, one hand negligently touching the jaw hinge of the huge beast. The Bronze Rider of Nemeth, Lord Flor, will require quarters for himself. I, Fëanor, Brown Rider, prefer to be lodged with the wingmen. We are in number 12. Flor liked that touch of Fëanor's, potting up the wing strength, as if Fax were incapable of counting. Fëanor had phrased it so adroitly as to make it impossible for Fax to protest the return insult. Lord Flor, Fax said through teeth fixed in a smile, the High Reaches are honored with your search. It will be to the credit of the High Reaches, Flor replied smoothly, if one of its own supplies the Weyr. To our everlasting credit, Fax replied as suavely. In the old days, many notable werewomen come from my holds. Your holds? Asked Flor, politely smiling as he emphasized the plural. Ah, yes, you are now overlord of Ruatha, are you not? There have been many from that hold. A strange, tense look crossed Fax's face, quickly supplanted by a determinedly affable grin. Fax stepped aside, gesturing Flor to enter the hold. Fax's troop leader barked a hasty order, and the men formed two lines, their metal-edged boots flicking sparks from the stones. At unspoken orders, all the dragons rose with a great churning of air and dust. Flor strode nonchalantly past the welcoming files. The men were rolling their eyes in alarm as the beast glided above to the inner courts. Someone on the high tower uttered a frightened yelp as Nemeth took his position on that vantage point. His great wings drove phosphoric-scented air across the inner court as he maneuvered his great frame onto the inadequate landing space. Outwardly oblivious to the consternation, fear, and awe the dragons inspired, Flor was secretly amused and rather pleased by the effect. Lords of the Holds needed this reminder that they must still deal with dragons, not just their riders, who were men, mortal and murderable. The ancient respect for dragonmen, as well as dragonkind, must be reinstilled in the modern breasts. The hold has just risen from table, Lord Flor, if Fax suggested. His voice trailed off at Flor's smiling refusal. Convey my duty to your lady, Lord Fax, Flor rejoined, noticing with inward satisfaction the tightening of Fax's jaw muscles at the ceremonial request. Flor was enjoying himself thoroughly. He had not yet been born on the occasion of the last search, the one that ill-fatedly provided the incompetent Jorah. But he had studied the accounts of previous searches in the old records that had included subtle ways to confound those lords who preferred to keep their ladies sequestered on the dragonman road. For Fax to refuse Flor the opportunity to pay his duty would have been tantamount to a major insult, discharged only in mortal combat. You would prefer to see your orders first? Fax countered. Flor flicked an imaginary speck from his soft warehide sleeve and shook his head. Duty first, he said with a rueful shrug. Of course. Fax all but snapped and strode smartly ahead, his heels pounding out the anger he could not express otherwise. Flor and Fëanor followed at a slower pace through the double-doored entry and its great metal panels, into the great hall, carved into the cliffside. The U-shaped table was being cleared by nervous servitors who rattled and dropped tableware as the two dragonmen entered. Fax had already reached the far end of the hall and stood impatiently at the open slab door, the only access to the inner hold, which, like all other such holds, burrowed deep into stone, the refuge in all time of peril. They eat not badly, Fëanor remarked casually to Flor, appraising the remnants still on the table. Better than the Weyr, it would seem, Flor replied dryly, covering his speech with his hand, as he saw two drudges staggering under the weight of a tray that bore a half-eaten carcass. Young and tender, Fëanor said in a bitter undertone, from the look of it, while the stringy, barren beasts are delivered up to us. Naturally. A pleasantly favored hall, Flor said amiably as they reached Fax. Then, seeing Fax impatient to continue, Flor deliberately turned back to the banner-hung hall. He pointed out to Fëanor the deeply set slit windows, heavy bronze shutters open to the bright noonday sky. Facing east, too, as they ought. That new hall at Tilgar Hold actually faces south, I'm told. Tell me, Lord Fax, do you adhere to the old practices and mount a dawn guard? Fax frowned, trying to parse Flor's meaning. There is always a guard at the tower. An easterly guard. Fax's eyes jerked toward the windows, then back, sliding across Flor's face to Fëanor's, and back again to the windows. There are always guards, he answered sharply. On all the approaches. Oh, just the approaches. And Flora turned to Fëanor and nodded wisely. Where else? Demanded Fax, concerned, glancing from one dragonman to the other. I must ask that of your harper. Do you keep a trained harper in your hold? Of course, I have several trained harpers. Fax jerked his shoulders straighter. Flora affected not to understand. Lord Fax is the overlord of 6 other holds, Fëanor reminded his wing leader. Of course, Flora assented, with exactly the same inflection Fax had used a moment before. The mimicry did not go unnoticed by Fax, but as he was unable to construe deliberate insult out of an innocent affirmation, he stalked into the glow-lit corridors. The dragonman followed. It is good to see one holder keeping so many ancient customs, Flora said to Fëanor approvingly for Fax's benefit as they passed into the inner hold. There are many who have abandoned the safety of solid rock and enlarged their outer holds to dangerous proportions. I can't condone the risk myself. Their risk, Lord Flor. Another's gain. Fax snorted derisively, slowing to a normal strut. Gain? How so? Any outer hold is easily penetrated, Bronze Rider, with trained forces, experienced leadership, and a well-considered strategy. The man was not a braggart, Flora decided. Nor, in these peaceful days, did he fail to mount tower guards. However, he kept within his hold, not out of obedience to ancient laws, but through prudence. He kept harpers for ostentation rather than because tradition required it. But he allowed the pits to decay. He permitted grass to grow. He accorded dragonmen barest civility on one hand and offered veiled insults on the other. Man to be watched. The women's quarters in Fax's hold had been moved from the traditional innermost corridor to those at the cliff face. Sunlight poured down from the 3 double-shuttered, deep casement windows in the outside wall. Flora noted that the bronze hinges were well oiled. The sills were the regulation spear length. Fax had not given in to the recent practice of diminishing the protective wall. The chamber was richly hung with appropriately gentle scenes of women occupied in a manner of feminine tasks. Doors gave off to the main chamber on both sides into smaller sleeping alcoves, and from these, at Fax's bidding, his women hesitantly emerged. Fax sternly gestured to a blue-gowned woman, her hair white streaked, her face lined with disappointments and bitterness, her body swollen with pregnancy. She advanced awkwardly, stopping several feet from her lord. From her attitude, Flora deduced that she came no closer to Fax than was absolutely necessary. The Lady of Crom, mother of my heirs, Fax said without pride or cordiality. My lady, Flora hesitated, waiting for her name to be supplied. She glanced warily at her lord. Gemma, snapped Fax curtly. Flora bowed deeply. My lady Gemma. The Weyr is on search and requests the hospitality of the hold. My lord Flor, the Lady Gemma replied in a low voice, you are most welcome. Flor did not miss the slight slur on the adverb, or the fact that Gemma had no trouble naming him. His smile was warmer than courtesy demanded, warm with gratitude and sympathy. Judging by the number of women in these quarters, Fax bedded well and frequently. There might be 1 or 2 Lady Gemma could bid farewell without regret. Fax went through the introductions, mumbling names until he realized this strategy was not going to work. Flora would politely beg the lady's name again. Fëanor, his smile brightening as he took heed which ladies Fax preferred to keep anonymous, lounged indolently by the doorway. Flora would compare notes with him later, although on cursory examination there were none here worthy of the search. Fax preferred his women plump and small. There wasn't a saucy one in the lot. If there once had been, the spirit had been beaten out of them. Fax, no doubt, was stud, not lover. Some of the covey had not all winter long made use of the water, judging by the amount of sweet oil gone rancid in their hair. Of them all, if these were all, the Lady Gemma was the only willful one, and she was too old. The amenities over, Fax ushered his unwelcome guests outside. Fnor was excused by his wing leader to join the other dragonmen. Fax peremptorily led the way to the quarters he had assigned the bronze rider. The chamber was on a lower level than the woman's suite, and was certainly adequate to the dignity of its occupant. The many colored hangings were crowded with bloody battles, individual swordplay, bright-hued dragons in flight, firestones burning on the ridges, and all that Pern's scarlet-stained history offered. A pleasant room, Flora acknowledged, stripping off gloves and weirhide tunic, throwing them carelessly to the table. I shall see to my men and the beasts. The dragons have all been fed recently, he commented, pointing up Fax's omission and inquiring. I request liberty to wander through the craft hold. Fax sourly granted what was traditionally a dragonman's privilege. I shall not further disrupt your routine, Lord Fax, for you must have many demands on you, with 7 holds to supervise. Floor inclined his body slightly to the overlord, turning away as a gesture of dismissal. He could imagine the infuriated expression on Fax's face and listened to the stamping retreat. He waited long enough to be sure Fax was out of the corridor, then briskly retraced his steps up to the great hall. Bustling drudges paused in setting up additional trestle tables to eye the dragonman. He nodded pleasantly to them, looking to see if one of these females might possibly have the stuff of which werewomen were made. Overworked, underfed, scarred by lash and disease, they were just what they were, drudges, fit only for hard, menial work. Fënor and the men had settled themselves in a hastily vacated barrack room. The dragons were perched comfortably on the rock ridges above the hold. They had so arranged themselves that every segment of the wide valley fell under their scrutiny. All had been fed before leaving the weir, and each rider kept his dragon in light but alert charge. There were to be no incidents on the search. As a group, the dragonmen rose at Floor's entrance. No tricks, no troubles. Look around closely, he said laconically. Return by sundown with the names of any likely prospects. He caught Fënor's grin, remembering how Fax had slurred over some names. Descriptions are in order and craft affiliation. The men nodded, their eyes glinting with understanding. They were flatteringly confident of a successful search, even as Flar's doubts grew now that he had seen all of Fax's women. By all logic, the pick of the high reaches should be in Fax's chief hold. They were not. Still, there were many large craft holds, not to mention the 6 other high holds to visit. All the same, in an unspoken accord, Flor and Fënor left the barracks. The men would follow, unobtrusively, in pairs or singly, to reconnoiter the craft hold and near farm holds. The men were as overtly eager to be abroad as Flor was privately. There had been a time when dragon men were frequent and favored guests in all the great holds throughout Pern, from southern Nerat to High Tillet. This pleasant custom, too, had died along with other observances, evident of the lower guard in which the weir was presently held. Flor vowed to correct this. He forced himself to trace in memory the insidious changes. The records, which each weirwoman kept, were proof of the gradual but perceptible decline, traceable through the past 200 full turns. Knowing the facts did not alleviate the condition, and Flor was of that scant handful in the weir itself who did credit records and ballots alike. The situation might shortly reverse itself radically if the old tales were to be believed. There was a reason, an explanation, purpose, Flor felt, for every one of the Weir laws from first impression to the firestones, from the grass-free heights to ridge-running gutters. For elements as minor as controlling the appetite of a dragon to limiting the inhabitants of the Weir. Although why the other 5 weirs had been abandoned, Flor did not know. Idly he wondered if there were records, dusty and crumbling, lodged in the disused weirs. He must contrive to check when next his wings flew patrol. Certainly, there was no explanation in Benden Weyr. There is industry, but no enthusiasm, Nor was saying, drawing Flor's attention back to their tour of the craft hold. They had descended to the guttered ramp from the hold into the craft hold proper, the broad roadway lined with cottages up to the imposing stone craft halls. Silently, Flor noted moss-clogged gutters on the roofs, the vines clasping the walls. It was painful for one of his calling to witness the flagrant disregard of simple safety precautions. Growing things were forbidden near the habitations of mankind. News travels fast, Fëanor chuckled, nodding at a hurrying craftsman in the smock of a baker who gave them a mumbled good day. Not a female in sight. His observation was accurate. Women should be abroad at this hour, bringing in supplies from the storehouses, washing in the river on such a bright warm day, or going out to the farmholds to help with planting. Not a gowned figure in sight. We used to be preferred mates, Fëanor remarked caustically. We'll visit the clothman's hall first, if my memory serves me. As it always does, Fëanor interjected wryly. He took no advantage of their blood relationship, but he was more at ease with the Bronze Rider than most of the dragonmen, the other Bronze Riders included. Flor was reserved in a close-knit society of easy equality. He flew a tightly disciplined wing, but men maneuvered to serve under him. His wing always excelled in the games. None ever floundered in between to disappear forever, and no beast in his wing sickened, leaving a man in dragonless exile from the Weir, a part of him, numb forever. Littell came this way and settled in one of the high reaches, Flor continued. Littell? Yes, a green rider from Slull's wing, you remember. An ill-timed swerve during the spring games had brought Littell and his beast into the full blast of a phosphine emission from Slull's bronze hooven. Littell had been thrown from his beast's neck as the dragon tried to evade the blast. Another wingmate had swooped to catch the rider, but the green dragon, his left wing crisped, his body scorched, had died of shock and phosphine poisoning. Littell would aid our search, Fëanor agreed, as the 2 dragonmen walked up to the bronze doors of the clothman's hall. They paused on the threshold, adjusting their eyes to the dimmer light within. Glows punctuated the wall recesses and hung in clusters above the large looms where the finer tapestries and fabrics were woven by master craftsmen. The pervading mood was one of quiet, purposeful industry. Before their eyes had adapted, however, a figure glided to them, muttering a polite, if curt request for them to follow none. They were led to the right of the entrance, to a small office, curtained from the main hall. Their guide turned to them, his face visible in the wall glows. There was that air about him that marked him indefinably as a dragonman. But his face was lined deeply, one side seamed with old burn marks. His eyes, sick with a hungry yearning, dominated his face. He bunked constantly. I am now Littell, he said in a harsh voice. Flor nodded acknowledgement. You'd be Flor, Littell said, and you, Fëanor. You both have the look of your sire. Flar nodded again. Lytal swallowed convulsively, the muscles in his face twitching as the presence of dragonmen revived his awareness of exile. He essayed a smile. Dragons in the sky. The news spread faster than threads. Nemorth has laid a female. And Jorah dead? Lytal asked concernedly. His face cleared of nervous movement for a second. Half-flewer? Flar nodded. Lytal grimaced bitterly. Regal again, huh? He stared off in the middle distance, his eyelids quiet, but the muscle along his jaw talking up the constant movement. You have the high reaches? All of them? Lytal asked, turning back to the dragonman, a slight emphasis on all. Flar gave an affirmative nod again. You've seen the women. Lytal's disgust showed through the words. It was a statement, not a question, for he hurried on. Well, there are no better in all the reaches. His tone expressed the utmost disdain. He eased himself down to the heavy table that half filled one corner of the small room. His hands were clenched so tightly around the wide belt that secured the loose tunic to his body that the heavy leather was doubled. You would almost expect the opposite, wouldn't you? Lytal continued. He was talking too much and too fast. It would have been insultingly rude in another lesser man. It was the terrible loneliness of the man's exile from the Weyr that drove him to garrulity. Lytal skimmed the surfaces with hurried questions he himself answered, rather than dipped once into matters too tender to be touched, such as his insatiable need for those of his kind. Yet he was giving the dragonmen exactly the information they needed. But Vax likes his women comfortably flushed and docile, Lytal rattled on. Even the Lady Gemma has learned. It'd be different if he didn't need her family's support. It would be different indeed. So he keeps her pregnant, hoping to kill her in childbed one day. And he will. He will. Lytal's laughter grated unpleasantly. When Vax came to power, any man with wit set his daughters down from the high reaches or drew a brand across their faces. He paused, his countenance dark in bitter memory, his eyes slits of hatred. I was a fool and thought my position gave me immunity. Lytal drew himself up, squaring his shoulders, turning full to the two dragonmen. His expression was vindicative, his voice low and tense. Kill that tyrant dragonman, for the sake and safety of Pern, of the Weyr, of the Queen. He only bides his time. He spreads discontent among the other lords. Lytal's laughter had an hysterical edge to it now. He fancies himself as good as the dragonmen. There are no candidates, then, in this hold? Flar said, his voice sharp enough to cut through the man's preoccupation with his curious theory. Lytal stared at the bronze rider. Did I not say it? The best either died under Vax or were sent away. What remains is nothing. Nothing. Weak-minded, ignorant, foolish, vapid. You had that with Jorah. His jaw snapped shut over his next words. He shook his head, scrubbing his face to ease his anguish and despair. And the other holds? Lytal shook his head, frowning darkly. The same. Either dead or fled. What of Ruatha Hold? Lytal stopped shaking his head and looked sharply at Flar, his lips curling into a cunning smile. He laughed mirthlessly. You think to find a Tureen or Moretta hiding in Ruatha Hold in these times? Well, Bronze Rider, all of Ruathan blood are dead. Vax's blade was thirsty that day. He knew the truth of those Harper's tales, that Ruathan lords gave full measure of hospitality to dragonmen, and the Rothan were a breed apart. They were, you know, Lytall's voice dropped in a confiding whisper, exiled weirmen like myself in that line. Flor nodded gravely, unwilling to deprive the man of such a sop to his self-esteem. No, there is little, very little left in Ruatha Valley, Lytall chuckled softly. Vax gets nothing from that hold for trouble. His reflection restored Lytall to a semblance of normal behavior, and his face twisted into a better humor. We of this hold are now the best clothmen in all of Herne, and our smithies turn out a better-tempered weapon. His eyes sparkled with pride in his adopted community. The conscripts from Ruatha tend to die of curious diseases or accidents, and the women Fax used to take. His laugh was nasty. It is rumored he was impotent for months after. Flor's active mind jumped to a curious conclusion. There are none of the blood left? None. Any families in the holdings with Weyr blood? Lytall frowned, glanced in surprise at Flor. He rubbed the scarred side of his face thoughtfully. There were, he admitted slowly. There were. But I doubt if any live on. He thought a moment longer, then shook his head empathetically. There was such resistance at the invasion, and no quarter given. At the hold, Fax beheaded ladies as well as babes, and he imprisoned or executed any known to have carried arms for Ruatha. Flor shrugged. The idea had been a probability only. With such severe reprisals, Fax undoubtedly had eliminated the resistance as well as the best craftsmen. That would account for the poor quality of Ruathan products and the emergence of the High Regis clothmen as the best in their trade. I wish I had better news for you, Dragonman, Lytall murmured. No matter, Flor assured him, one hand poised to part the hanging in the doorway. Lytall came up to him swiftly, his voice urgent. Heed what I say about Fax's ambitions. Force, Regal, or whoever is Weyr leader next, keep watch on the High Regis. Is Fax aware of your leanings? The haunted, hungry yearning crossed Lytall's face. He swallowed nervously, answering with no emotion in his voice. That would not signify if it suited the Lord of the High Reaches, but my guild protects me from persecution. I am safe enough in the craft. He's dependent on the proceeds of our industry. He snorted, mocking. I am the best weaver of battle scenes, to be sure, he added, cocking one eyebrow waggishly. Dragons are no longer woven in fabric as the comrades of heroes. You noticed, of course, the prevalence of growing greens? Flor grimaced his distaste. That is not all we have noted either, but Fax keeps the other traditions. Lytall waved his consideration aside. He does that because it is basic in military sense. His neighbors armed after he took Ruatha, for he did it by treachery, let me tell you. And let me warn you also, Lytall jabbed a finger in the direction of the hold. He scorns openly at the tales of threads. He taunts the harpers for stupid nonsense of the old ballads, and has banned from their repertoire all dragon lore. The new generation will grow up totally ignorant of duty, tradition, and precaution. Flor was not surprised to hear that on top of Lytall's other disclosures, although it did disturb him more than anything else he had heard. Other men, too, denied the verbal transmissions of historic events, accounting them no more than the meanderings of harpers. Yet the red star pulsed in the sky, and the time was drawing near when they would hysterically reavow the old allegiances in fear of their very lives. Have you been abroad in the early morning of late? Asked Fëanor, grinning maliciously. I have, Lytall breathed out in a hush-choked whisper. I have. A groan was wrenched from his guts, and he whirled away from the dragonmen, his head bowed between hunched shoulders. "Go," he said, gritting his teeth. And as they hesitated, he pleaded, "Go." Floor walked quickly from the room, followed by Fëanor. The bronze rider crossed the quiet, dim hall with long strides and exploded into the startling sunlight. His momentum took him into the center of the square, where he stopped so abruptly that Fëanor, hard on his heels, nearly collided with him. "We will spend exactly the same time within the other holds," he announced in a tight voice, his face averted from Fëanor's eyes. Flaor's throat was constricted. It was difficult suddenly for him to speak. He swallowed hard several times. "To be dragonless," murmured Fëanor pityingly. The encounter with Lytal had roiled his depths in a mournful way to which he was unaccustomed. That Fëanor appeared equally shaken went far to dispel Fëanor's private opinion that his half-brother was incapable of emotion. "There is no other way once first impression has been made. You know that," Fëanor roused himself to say curtly. He strode off to the hall, bearing the leatherman's device. Ah, my friend, what a visit that was to Fax's hold. In this chapter, we watched through Fëanor's sharp, steady eyes as he sized up the crumbling estate, the wary folk within, and the self-styled lord of the high reaches. Thank you for resting here with me by the fire as we followed Fëanor's careful steps and quiet observations. The winds of change are stirring in Pern's skies, and soon enough, we'll see what destiny has in store for both dragon and rider. Until then, keep your heart light, your tea warm, and your dreams full of adventure. I'll be waiting by the fire.